Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome back for our last of 6 sessions with Nancy Pearl on bringing Reader's Advisory tips and techniques online. So our final session, I feel like we kind of saved the most fun one for last. When we were asking our libraries what were some of the techniques or some of the skills that they really felt that people needed to work on, we got a lot of suggestions, but one of the main suggestions that we got were that people really wanted to be able to have a list of no-fail choices, things that they could just pull out of their hat at any given time. So we saved that for the last session. So we're calling this collaborative list making, no-fail choices in different genres and topics. And so we are here again with Nancy Pearl and a group of librarians in the Hangout that have joined us. And so I'm going to have the librarians introduce themselves first, and then Nancy will move to you. And this time we decided that we were going to start with the token American because I don't have Greg.
Hello, everyone. As the token American, hello, my name is Greg Windsor. I'm a reference librarian here in Johnson County, Kansas, right outside of Kansas City.
All right, and then we'll go back to our Canadians.
Annika.
Oh, we're starting with me again. Sorry. Hi, my name is Annika. I am a teen services technician here at the Surrey Libraries at the Guildford branch.
And I'm Jenny. I work at the City Centre branch in Surrey in BC, Canada, and I'm an information services librarian.
Hi, I'm Melanie. I work at the Stratford Public Library in Stratford, Ontario, and I am a public service librarian.
Hi everyone, I'm Maxine. I work with BiblioCommons out of the Toronto office, and I work in marketing.
And then finally, our guest for today, our guest speaker, Nancy Pearl. Nancy, welcome.
Thank you. I'm sorry, I'm sad that this is the last session. This is the first time I've ever used Google Hangout, so it was really fun, and I just want to keep doing it.
We were saying while we were kind of having everybody get on that wouldn't it be fun to just do this all the time, talk books?
It would be.
But
I love it.
Again,
I think it's a great idea.
The topic that we saved for last was, again, about kind of bringing together the great brain trust that we have kind of here in our Hangout and out in the audience to do some work to make, kind of give us a set of tools for no-fail choices. So, Nancy, one of the things that we decided that we wanted to start talking about with this was to talk about iconic authors in each doorway. So for those of you who have been part of all of the sessions today, we started out by talking about the 4 doorways and how to use really BiblioCommons to tag them so that we can help people really get at the appeal factors for books. We talked a little bit in the last session about translating that into more compelling content. So I don't know if you'll give us just a quick overview of the 4 doorways again, and then give us who you think of as iconic authors in each doorway.
So basically the 4 doorways are story, character, setting, and language. And what that refers to is how people experience the book, what carries them through the book. And an iconic story-driven author, I can think of 2. One is Dan Brown.
Oh, Nancy, do you want me to bring up your lists?
Oh, sure, yes. Oh, great. So,
sorry.
I forgot we did that. So one iconic story-driven writer is Dan Brown. Another iconic story-driven writer is Jodi Picoult. And you can see what they have in common, and you could see why people who read for story would like either one of those or both of those books. An iconic character-driven writer, someone for whom character. Well, here's our story-driven list that Stephanie and I worked on, collaborated together, and I think it's so clear that you could suggest any one of these books to somebody who has mentioned another one of these books, and a lot of these we've talked about before. So, Coma. The new edition of the Robin Cook is out. The Da Vinci Code, Jodi Picoult, as I said, John Grisham, as I said, and of course James Patterson. The one that looks to me although it might as though kind of an outlier in this list, but I think story is a major doorway in this list, is To Kill a Mockingbird. I think that what carries a lot of people through that, not what carried necessarily what was the first thing that carried me through it, but what carries a lot of people through it is the story in that book. For me, it was character. Again, because that's what carries you through everything. Sorry.
So we'll bring up your character-driven.
Okay.
So again, all of these lists are available in Nancy's account. If you just go up here and search by user, and then type in Nancy Pearl, you'll be able to get these lists as well. So here are your picks for character-driven novels.
Right. So Emma. Again, To Kill a Mockingbird. I mean, you can't really forget Scout and Boo Radley. That's what a lot of people think about when they do that. The Sports Writer by Richard Ford. The second big doorway for that would be Language, about a boy, descriptive of what the book is. The Poisonwood Bible is a book that has the character is not only a big doorway in that, but setting is a big doorway in that, and story is a big doorway in that. And then I had to put an Ann Tyler novel on this because she's, for me, the iconic character-driven writer, especially her early, not her most recent books, but her middle year books, I think, are just The Dinner at the Homesick Restaurant, etc. The Clockwinder is on here. So these are all books in which character is what will draw people into the book. If you don't like character, if character is not what you read for, if you want something fast moving, then these books are going to be way too slow for you. And the reason that, for example, people don't like Emma is that it's too slow. I mean, for those people who love it, a lot happens. But if what you're looking for is a lot of white space and not a lot of description, Emma is not the book for you. And Richard Ford's The Sports Writer, that's another good example of that. The difference between the sports, if you were doing a pie chart, the Sports Writer differs from About a Boy. They both have big character doorways, but their secondary doorways are different. For Richard Ford, the secondary big doorway is language. For Nick Hornby, the second big doorway is story. So should we do setting?
Yeah. Let me just bring it back up. There we go.
Okay, setting, I think the iconic book, one of the iconic books for setting is Midnight in the Garden of Good and Evil about Savannah, Georgia. When people talk about that book, they talk about wanting to drop everything and go to Savannah and sort of see everything that the author talked about. Another book in which setting is where the world building is just impeccable is, of course, George R.R. Martin's A Game of Thrones. And then, this list really exemplifies the relationship that I see between readers of historical fiction and readers of fantasy. And that's the kind of reader's advisory discussion where you're going to actually have to take people, because our patrons don't naturally think that, and you're going to have to wean them into thinking that way. And a good author to use to move from historical fiction to fantasy is a Canadian writer in Toronto, Guy Gavriel Kay. All of his books they're historical novels with a tinge of fantasy, and they're a great, great, great way of showing the relationship between those two, what we would call genres. If I had my druthers, I would erase the word genre from the English language. But I don't have my druthers. Gone with the Wind, Margaret Mitchell, for many people, their picture of the South and the Civil War comes directly from the pen of Margaret Mitchell. In the Company of the Courtesan by Sarah Dunant, a wonderful, wonderful historical novel. A Year in Provence we talked about. And then The Turnaround one of those books where you really, by George Pelecanos, where with all of his books, the place where he sets it, Washington D.C. in most cases, is another character. And I remember when I was talking to somebody, he said he had just finished a book he loved. He wanted another book just like it. And I said, well, tell me about the book. And he said, oh, it's Death Comes for the Archbishop by Willa Cather. And when I think about Death Comes for the Archbishop, I think that it's a character-driven book, that it's the Archbishop and death is coming. But because I said, tell me about that book, and didn't just base my suggestion to him on my opinion of the book or my reading of the book, he said, when I finished that book, I just called the airlines and made a reservation to go to Santa Fe because I just had to see where it was set. So that's somebody who really, you want another book that makes that person do that kind of thing. And here's a list. Nobody would want to go to Westeros, or however you pronounce it,
You're right.
Georgia.
I would.
So, a little too violent for most of us. But, that sense of wanting to leave where you are and go see another place because you've read a book that describes it so evocatively. After Peter Mayle's A Year in Provence was so popular, I suspect there were no more properties for sale in Provence because, wealthy people snapped them up because they wanted an experience just like Peter Mayle.
And then we have one more list.
Yeah, so language is the hardest one to describe. When you're talking, we talked a little bit about the doorways, and I talk about this in the TEDx talk that is linked to the page. Stephanie has linked that. But when you're talking about language, what you're talking about is almost this feeling that you get of awe and wonder that an author could take the language that he or she is writing in and put words together in ways that you never thought about it. So, one of the classic books on one of the iconic writers of this in this list is 100 Years of Solitude, the Gabriel Garcia Marquez. Now, personally, even though language is very, very, very important to me, one of my two big doorways, like 15 Years of Solitude was enough for me. I mean, I just could not finish this book. I'm a little embarrassed to say that, but there it is. You have to be honest about what you like and don't like. But the Goldfinch, word for word, on a kind of macro, I think the term would be a macro level, almost nobody can write better than Donna Tartt. Whether or not you like the book is going to be separate from it. That's going to depend on the other doorways or other factors that we could talk about. The Blazing World by Siri Hustvedt. Melanie, have you read that book?
Not yet.
Okay, I think that you should put this on your list because I think you would like this.
Okay.
Canada by Richard Ford. Almost any of Richard Ford's books could be on this list. Toni Morrison, Beloved. There is another iconic language-driven writer. Second big doorway for Toni Morrison is variously, depending on the book, character and perhaps setting. And then Infinite Jest. When people talk about Infinite Jest, it's not the plot of the book. It's David Foster Wallace's innovative use of language. So Stephanie, you said to me, what book is there? You challenged me to come up with a book that has, all four of the doorways equally. And I'm not sure that I can think of one, but so the best that I can do is three big doorways and three, and what it means, the more equal the doorways are, those are really your go-to books, because what you're saying, if you're saying that this book has a big character, big setting, and big story doorway, is that you can give it to almost every reader who comes to you. So one of those books that's been very popular in Seattle, but was also on the New York Times bestseller list, that I think has three of those doorways that are pretty similar in size, is The Boys in the Boat by Daniel James Brown, which has a wonderful story. It has characters that you care about, and the setting for people who live in the state of Washington, especially in Seattle, because it takes place here, that's important to them. But well, I'd be interested to hear some other ones. I think The Prince of Tides is a book that maybe comes closest for me to having all 4 equal doorways, which means I would suggest that to almost everybody. And the more the more popular a book is and the more lasting a book is, I think depends on the size of the doorways. The Blazing World by Siri Hustvedt, as wonderful as it is never going to be on the New York Times bestseller list because the story is so slow moving. And the majority of patrons that we have coming into our library are people who are looking for story-driven books. Those are the books that are the bestsellers, and those are the books that most people read. And if you're looking for a story-driven book, if you get that desk paralysis that comes upon all of us, and you can't think of something, you could just go out into the stacks of the fiction section and whirl around really fast and make yourself really dizzy, and then open your eyes and point to a book, or point to a book and then open your eyes. And the chances are that book is going to be a story-driven book. So I'd be interested to hear, other people's go-to book and see how that fits in. But Annika talked about The Fault in Our Stars. I mean, read it and weep. Now, The Fault in Our Stars. Now, Jenny, you're shaking your head. Okay.
No, it didn't work for Jenny.
The 3/4 of it worked for me, and the final bit, when the author comes from overseas, I actually thought that was going to be a dream or fake in some way, and so that didn't really work for me. But I do have one that I think matches all 4 doorways, and it's The Absolutely True Diary of a Part-Time Indian by Sherman Alexie. I think it hits all those notes, all 4 doorways.
Now I need to think about. I need to subject that to my deepest before falling asleep.
Sure.
Mind. But on the surface, I think that's correct. Yep. And in fact, that's the book that the American Embassy in Sarajevo used for their "If All Teens in Bosnia Read the Same Book." That was the book that was used.
And the first Persepolis book might be close.
Cool. Good.
So this is actually the challenge or the activity that we have for people in this session. So we wanted to, again, be able to take all of the great stuff, the great ideas that people have, and have a way for people to use it. And while the ability for us to build lists together is something that we're working on, it doesn't exist yet. So if you go to the event page for this, I'll just bring it up so people can see it. Where is it? Right here. There's linked on the event page, you can see it here, 4 Google Docs with open permissions. So our activity for today, our challenge for the panelists and for those who are viewing, is to pick one of these and go in, or pick more than one, and go in and at least add 1 book that you would add to kind of Nancy's list. When we looked at, for example, those story-driven books of Patterson and Grisham, who would you add to that list? So that if we were going to build a list together, what would you want to see on it? So everybody should be able to click on those links on the event page. So if you're watching it streaming, it should just be right below that you should be able to click on it. And you can feel free to go add some things in. And then while we're working on that activity, again, remember that the questions, you have the ability to ask questions with the little Q&A app. If you go over to the side of your Hangout and press the little thing that looks like a talk box that says Q&A in it, that will open up. We can see your questions. And that for those of us who are here in the Hangout with Nancy, maybe we can start thinking about things that we would like and add them right to the list.
Great.